All right, everyone. Welcome once again to the Faces of Business. I'm your host, Damon Pistulka, and with me today, I am happy to say I've got Jim Kunkle. Jim, welcome, my friend.
Damon, it's great to be here. Hello to everybody. Looking for a great broadcast this evening.
Oh yeah, we're gonna have some fun. We're gonna have some fun, Jim. So you're coming out of Pittsburgh. So is the what is the weather like in Pittsburgh this time of year?
Well, we're kind of getting into that period of time when things start to transition. You start getting those early spring birds singing a little bit, but occasionally you'll get a nice warm day and then it'll be below 30 degrees or 20 degrees at night. But as deeper we get into March, things start to get more stabilized and those pretty little flowers start to push their way out of the ground.
Yep. Good stuff. I mean, just before we got on here, I actually stepped outside and I'm in Seattle and I think it's in the 50s today and the low 50s and not raining. So there's actually a little bit of that yellow orb in the sky shining on me, which we don't see much this time of year. But yeah, this is great because I noticed the flowers and the plants and everything are starting to look like, hey, I might be coming back. So it's a good time of year.
Yeah, my youngest daughter is doing her PhD at the University of Washington. She lives up in Seattle. In fact, my wife is up there right now visiting her for the week.
Nice. Well, it's actually not a bad place in the wintertime. It doesn't get very cold. So
Yeah, I
that's
love
good.
Seattle. I used to do a lot of travel to Seattle in my past business life, and great region, great area. The volcanoes up there kind of scare me a little.
That is one. That is one. I remember I was here for the last big earthquake, and I had, growing up in the Midwest, we just didn't have earthquakes. That was a little different. It was different. I was driving down the interstate, and it felt like a tire fell off my car. That was, yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
It was quite interesting.
we don't get earthquakes here in Pittsburgh.
Yeah, yeah, that's good. That's good. So it's cool to get to talk to you today, Jim, because man, we're going to talk today about the importance of content. And, when we talk about the importance of content, I think it's cool to get you on because when people talk about corrosions or coatings, just protective coatings, they really don't think about content like many other industrial sectors. Everybody looks at it and goes, why would I do that? Kurt Anderson and we do the manufacturing e-commerce success on Friday, and we talk about these things a fair amount. And I think it's universal across the industrial sectors of the world, really, is that they don't understand how interesting their stuff really is to their customers.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And really, when you look in the manufacturing hemisphere, there's so much. There are a number of podcasts, and there are a number of content creators, and some of which have a great following, and they have great programs and great content. My industry, when you're talking about the coatings and corrosion side, even though they're kind of separate or separate industries, they have a commonality, and that commonality all the time is corrosion and fighting against corrosion. But that our industry seemed to be a little bit behind the curve with content.
Yeah. Yeah. So when you talk about the corrosion industry, just give a couple typical examples. I mean, I know like, putting a powder coating on something so it doesn't rust, but give us some interesting examples that you've seen of corrosion coatings that you go, wow, I would have never thought of that.
Yeah, so I mean, when you really think about it, when you're using any types of metals and materials that come from the earth, the ultimate goal when you form those into a steel bridge or a ship or any type of a structure, they want to return back to their natural state. In other words, they want to go back to that base element. So
Oh,
they
wow.
basically corrode, they start to fall apart. And so, what a protective coating does is think about it creates a barrier to block the environmental impact. It could be salt, it could be water, it could be atmospheric, and that corrosion is what really accelerates that deterioration of that structure. Here in Pittsburgh, we just recently had a bridge that collapsed, and luckily there were no fatalities. This just happened a little over a month ago. And the bridge itself had corrosion issues. In fact, it was targeted to be repaired, but in the state of Pennsylvania, in Pittsburgh specifically, the Pittsburgh Authority did not request maintenance money to tackle the corrosion. Now, the final report hasn't come out yet, but it's probably going to be a corrosion issue that caused it to kind of slip and then fall down. It fell down on itself basically in a ravine. Ultimately, that bridge now is going to cost $25 million of taxpayers' dollars to replace it. But if it could have probably been $1 million or $5 million to do the repairs to deal with the corrosion and correct the situation. So in the United States, for example, we have aging infrastructure. Now that could be transmission towers that are sometimes 70 years old. Well, when the wind hits them, that can fall down.
Yeah.
Water, wastewater, concrete, and the containment for the clarifiers. Our bridges, we have a lot of legacy bridges that are historical and still. And so, to get that 100-year bridge, nobody wants to replace the Brooklyn Bridge. We want to preserve it forever. And the same thing when you look at, for example, in Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh has the most bridges of any city in the world, next, I think, to Venice, Italy. And a lot of our bridges are all the old-fashioned plate bridges, which are bolted together. And so they need to have maintenance, replacement of metal, and protective coatings. So it's an intensive process to do, but it needs to be done in order to maintain and sustain that survivability and life cycle of that bridge.
Yeah, no doubt. Well, and I've honestly, I didn't think we were going to talk about corrosion protection, but I think it's interesting when you think about what you just talked about. Our infrastructure is aging. A lot of this was built in, now, how many years ago? Almost 100 years ago. Some of this,
a lot of it has been.
Yeah, because it was built in the year after the Great Depression. In the 30s and 40s
with the public works.
The public works. Yeah. So that's, we talked about the Tennessee Valley Authority, other things like that were building dams and bridges and all these kind of things across the United States. And then you look at the interstate systems and all that were being built out all through the 50s and 60s. And every one of those bridges, like you said, is got metal in it or concrete of sorts. And when you talk about the one that you said too that I hadn't thought about before is protecting concrete from corrosion.
And the same thing with bridges, because when a steel bridge comes down, it's replaced typically with a concrete bridge. So within that, you have cabling that's in there really that adds to stress tensioning and all that. And that's where corrosion can attack as well. So corrosion, you can have attack in the rebar, which is metal, or when you have these strands that help secure the suspension bridge, it's concrete, that can impact that as well. And it's just amazing to work in this industry. I mean, I had the opportunity to go up one of the towers at the Golden Gate Bridge.
Oh, wow.
And when you're talking about riding an old elevator that's been there for, it seems like forever, it still operates. It's beautiful to see it. The last time I was in San Francisco, the bridge is in serious need of painting. The red is turning into a pink color. And so, they have their own crews, but they also bring in contractors to do the work as well. But it's just amazing to see how our ancestors, and I don't want to call them ancestors because we're only talking sometimes 70 or 100 years ago, but our relatives and great grandfathers and grandfathers that built America. It's just amazing to see the work that they did related to iron and steel.
Yeah.
And, me living here in Pittsburgh and you think about that, we were, at one time during the Cold War, Pittsburgh was a number one target by the Soviet Union because of our industrial capability. And now my city is transformed more into data, information, and then also medical and scientific work that happens here, and a lot of services that come out of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. So it's amazing to see the transformation. And, you and I were talking earlier about digital transformation, and that's the one thing I want to champion in the corrosion and coatings industry is the digital transformation of both corrosion and coatings. We went into the pandemic and there was some movement to that because everyone was working from home. But the industries, both industries on corrosion and coatings, really need to embrace it deeply because in order for us to tackle the problems that we face related to corrosion and our infrastructure, we have to educate the citizens out there. We need to educate all areas of life to understand that if we don't have infrastructure, we're not going to be able to do well in the future. We need these roads. We need these bridges. We need the power grid. We need everything that we have make it survive and carry on. So, that's really a big important thing for me when it comes to the corrosion and coatings content that I've done in the past. And that's an area that I like to champion very hard.
Well, you brought up a good point, is how do people understand what we can really do to protect these kind of things? And I think about it from two standpoints. First of all, the people that have to decide what the heck they're going to do. I mean, if I'm the head of the road works for a state or a county or a city or whatever, how the heck do I know what we can do to a bridge or something like that has metal and concrete, and the best way to protect it from corrosion and just degradation in general? And then two, if I'm the technical person in that state, that area, that
Mm-hmm.
needs to understand what are my options so I can recommend the right things. And when you talk about this is where content comes to play, and educating these people within the industry that are really concerned about something like corrosion protection for bridges, for whatever else they're talking about in our infrastructure, and who's giving them that content right now.
Exactly. That's a great point. And the thing to look at too, when I work with engineers, be it in some cases the public entities, and even sometimes with the private corporations, when it comes to corrosion and coatings, most of the people are put into that position. They didn't grow up telling their parents, I want to be a corrosion engineer, or I want to
Yes.
work around protective coatings. I want to protect these assets that are out there. So they get kind of voluntold, you're now the corrosion engineer, or you're now going to deal with our coating specification. So what they rely on the manufacturers that make the coating products. They rely on organizations that have standards and specialized training and accreditations, maybe for contractors. So there's a whole gambit of different entities out there that can provide them information. The end of the day, what's important is that public entity, that private or that corporation, that they have a strong specification in dealing with corrosion and protective coatings as part of that. But they also make sure that they have a very thorough plan of action when it comes to dealing with their assets, because the goal is to make sure that you do maintenance at the right time to maximize the life cycle. Because overall, if a pipeline, the worst thing that can happen, for example, with a gas pipeline or an oil pipeline, if you have a failure happen because of corrosion, or you have a failure of protective coatings on it that could lead to a rupture or a blowout, that not only will you have loss of lives sometimes or property, but the public relations element of that is such a detriment to that company. And, like I say, there are lots of examples out there of corrosion-related issues that have happened, be it buildings that collapse or bridges that fall. And sometimes when we deal with these high wind storms that might happen, where you have transmission towers come down because they're so corroded, they just don't have the structural support to hold the power lines up.
Yeah. Yeah. That's really something when you think about how extensive corrosion protection really keeps things working for us every single day.
Yeah, and with protective coatings, protective coatings is in everything. It's in, it's in those earbuds you're wearing. It's in your mobile phones. It's on the wood that's on your, the hutch behind you. So when everything we have that we work with, that we live with, that we use on a daily basis has some form, in most cases, of a protective coating on it. It could be as simple as a paint, or it could be some type of a sealant. And that's what protects that from the environment. And a lot of times it can also protect it from other external forces. We have now nanotechnology in coatings. We even have things that deal with ballistic coatings as well. You're eventually going to hear stories of self-healing coatings, and you might see a day where you have a merger of the biological type of coating systems that are in some way a living type of coating system, like your skin.
Wow. That would be something. That definitely would be, because the self-healing part of it would be just a tremendous benefit to protecting anything, really.
Yeah, and I think with you're looking at the military's looking at ballistic type of coating systems that will help in the protection of the warrior, but also too in the protection of of the equipment when it comes to a lot of the capital equipment we have. I mean, we have a Navy, we have an Air Force, and corrosion in a corner of an aircraft wing could lead to a
Oh
catastrophic
yeah.
failure.
Yeah.
And so there are so many things when we think about corrosion. We really, in some cases, we know what needs to be done, and I think what it comes down to is educating and getting it done, prioritizing it. But it comes down to effective planning. If you have a good game plan, you're going to be able to mitigate. You're never going to eliminate it, at least at this time with current technologies. We're not there yet, but you can at least mitigate it and make it manageable.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's great. Well, you can really tell, Jim, that you're a protective coating specialist, because the effortless way you can speak about it in many different phases. You've been in this a while and obviously understand the industry sector very well. So when you look at this sector, what are some of the challenges or things that you see around the protective coating sector that really could be improved with content?
Yeah, the first thing is when I highly encourage, I started off years ago doing, and I've done hundreds of short videos, which are more lessons to learn. I've done also 2 coatings and corrosion interviews where I talk about technical topics and other things related to coatings and corrosion. And on my YouTube channel, if you just search under Jim Kunkle on YouTube, you can take a look at a lot of that material. What I found in the industry was that we have a lack of content creators. We have a little bit related to podcast and some content, but it's more sales type related, and it's very small in quantity. And so what I highly encourage, and especially in my industry related to corrosion and coatings, people who are professionals in the industry need to go out there and create content. Talk about these technical issues, talk about the impact and the cost of corrosion and the ways that we can help alleviate or minimize or manage corrosion with protective coatings, for example. So I loved when I had the opportunity to get approved for LinkedIn Live, and I started streaming content in coatings and corrosion. I put it on my YouTube channel, and then I also had to go out on LinkedIn Live here and Twitter, for example. So I would stream in the multiple platforms. Over time, people started to really, reach out to me. And I've had probably the greatest story I could tell you is a contractor working in the mountains of Pakistan on a pipeline. He had a challenge related to a pressure drop when they were doing abrasive blasting up at altitude. And for whatever reason, I think his crew or his company, they just didn't have experience working at altitude, and they didn't realize that when you go up in the atmosphere, you have less pressure you're working with. So that means you have to be able to adjust and have the right type of equipment. And what happened was he started experiencing problems as they were moving up the pipeline to get to the higher elevation. And he had watched one of my interviews that I did with an equipment company that does abrasive blasting equipment, and he realized what the problem was. So he communicated to that company, and they helped him out. And he reached out to me. He says, I'm so glad I subscribed to your channel and I watched your content, because I'm not used to this. We do coatings work, and this was the first time we ever did a pipeline and went up a mountain. And boy, I learned a lot from watching that, and I knew who to contact to get the proper equipment, but also get my questions answered. And that made me feel great, because here it is. I'm just doing a general conversation with somebody about equipment and things like that, and technical discussion, and it benefited somebody who's running a company, and they're involved in something newer for them. But instead of it being a problem that would have persisted to a point where they would have had a work stoppage, he was able to utilize the content I was producing to learn something new. And, I think that's what I really enjoy about the content I do. I don't monetize anything, but I do love to talk to people. I love to interview people, and I love to get information out there. And as you said earlier, I'm very passionate in the industry I work in, because it's been a great industry for me, and it's got a lot of plus side for it. The other area, too, that I like to focus on is trying to educate the younger generation. Because we do have some universities and schools that do have corrosion engineering degrees, but not enough of them.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and it's I listen to you talk, and I talk about the coatings industry, and I think about the work that I do in manufacturing and
Mhm.
trying to spread the word of manufacturing, because we have all of these young people that are growing up, and they really don't look at the industrial sector for a place to have a career. And there are so many, so many, I will say it one more time, so many different things that you can do in the industrial sector. Everything from graphic design to chemical engineering and welding. There's just so much.
Yeah, I agree.
And I'm glad that you talk about educating young people, because listen, they could have a great career in coatings, they could have a great career in manufacturing, and they could be an accountant, they could be like I said, a graphic designer. It doesn't really matter. It's just focusing in on or choosing it as the niche.
Yeah, and I think right now in the current situation that we're facing with not only the pandemic and supply issues, but now we're dealing with these geopolitical issues as well on a global basis. This is the important time period for example, for the United States of America to look at our industrial sector, our manufacturing, and let's look to bring back the manufacturing as much as we can. Now, we're not going to be able to manufacture everything. I
Yeah.
understand that.
Yeah.
But we need to have some type of a safeguard because, God forbid a major event were to open up, and then all of a sudden we are limited because we don't have the capability or we have to rebuild it. Now, I know recently there's some development going on with semiconductors.
Mm-hmm.
We rely heavily on Taiwan for semiconductors. God forbid what would happen if there was a global
Mm-hmm.
political issue and we were not able to get semiconductors.
Yeah.
Not only related to the fighting force, but also as the industries here in America, we would suffer greatly if we don't have that
Yeah.
product coming in.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's a great point, is that to develop some of these things, these resources locally, because we need a good mix of them. Just because we do need the security, we do need, and also some of these resources. Yes, if I'm going to buy a bazillion of something, and labor is a factor, you may need to go someplace else to get it. But still, it doesn't mean that you shouldn't have part of it coming from locally or regionally, or in the same country at least. And then, really looking at the overall total cost. I interviewed, I don't know if you've ever met Harry Mosier from the Reshoring Initiative.
I've heard,
And
yeah.
yeah, Harry's awesome because he talks about total cost of ownership. And I saw this even in manufacturing, working in projects only, 10 years ago or so already, that the cost of ownership, when you consider inventory and well, especially in the last couple of years, how the shipping has gone so crazy, um, some of this, these advantages have disappeared. And then when you put in geopolitical, or just even from the pandemic, how that just snafu'd the supply chain, it makes sense to have your resources local or closer.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at, for example, when we're looking at the petroleum industry, we can switch quicker on a dime and start becoming a major exporter of energy product related to petroleum. But when
Hmm.
it comes to semiconductor manufacturing, or if we
Yeah.
need to
Yeah.
manufacture, you can't do it. And
Yeah.
the other thing too is what I really want to hear politicians say, not to get too political here on your program, is I want to hear talk of balance. And what I mean by balance is I appreciate, I understand when it comes to cost, you're going to have to work globally related to manufacturing, but you got to have
Yeah.
some balance and not have that unbalance that's crazy where hardly anything's going on in a particular side and everything's coming in from the
Hmm.
international production. That's when it becomes very much of a concern if there is an issue.
Yeah. Yeah. That's for sure. That's for sure. So let's go back to content a little bit, because I got some just content questions for you. So how long ago did you really start intentionally creating content?
So, roughly about a year prior to the pandemic is when I
Okay.
initially launched my YouTube channel and started with 0 subscribers.
Yeah.
In the process, the YouTube, it can be a grind, and for me it was a grind. I just went over 1,000 subscribers,
Yeah.
So it's taken me over 3 years to get to 1,000 subscribers. But, the thing that I found was that it's a labor of love. And when I started doing content and people would reach out to me saying, hey, I watch your YouTube channel. I love your videos, or I look forward to it, because it was a combination for me of doing stuff on LinkedIn and then YouTube. And as the news came out about LinkedIn Live, and I started watching these LinkedIn Lives, and eventually I applied for approval, got denied, and then I started posting more content. I was producing video and doing that.
Yeah.
So that kind of drove me to do more and more in video. But I found out video content is more effective than me writing a paper, because I do that as well, or doing a post. And it really seemed to benefit me professionally and also personally when it comes to my, as you mentioned, I'm a protective coating specialist. So, I have that certification in the coatings industry, but it helped me kind of really work on my brand, my own personal professional brand, but it also helped me professionally in the role that I was performing as a, full-time, staffer with an organization that focuses on corrosion and coatings. What I really enjoyed about it was the interaction that I got. And when I initially started looking, I'm doing this content on a weekly basis.
Yeah.
And then I'm doing these smaller short content as well. When I would reach out to people to schedule them, they would like, I definitely want to do it. And at that point I had maybe, I might have 50 or 100 subscribers. And I had people, because I thought it would be tough to find guests that were quality guests to be able, but they saw the value in it. I think they were believers, but they just weren't ready to take that leap. And I have several people that have started creating some content, but we need more. We need more people to get the message out there. And like I say, the crunch is happening in my industry where, the average age is at 50. I'm going to be 56. So a lot of the people that I find I encounter in corrosion and coatings, they tend to be in the 50s, 60s, some into the 70s and still working in the industry. So we need to euthanize, not euthanize, but you know what I mean? We need to bring the youth into this industries that I work in. So, and I think content will help do that. I really do think that. And you could be any age to create content. You don't have to be. It's not a young person's game. It's at any stage of your professional career or your life.
Yeah, that's for sure. And I think that's one of the things. I think people, when they start to generate content or think about it, when they start to think about generating content like this video that we're doing now.
Yeah.
I mean, I'll be honest. I just started doing them.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't plan it. I didn't even have a little template around the outside, anything. I just started talking to people because it was one of those things that I knew that I wanted to start doing, is sharing people's stories, sharing knowledge that can help other people. And I think if people are considering making content, and you can be an engineer in a coatings company that's manufacturing coatings, or you can be whatever, it doesn't really matter. Just share something about your industry that is a little bit of entertainment, a little bit of education, and a little bit interesting. And I think that's as simple as it is.
Yeah. And, for me, I've got the logo up pointed the wrong way, but the logo up here of Build Out, Build Out is not related to coatings and corrosion. And it is a main focus for me. It deals in business topics. Yeah. And what I found with Build Out is that when I create a live stream and I do an interview, I might have anywhere from 40, 50. Sometimes I have a great guest on where, I might have almost 100 people watching, in and out watching the live broadcast. But what I find is that the replay of that could be several hundred people watching the replay, and then repurposing some clips out of it to help promote it. That is what really is impactful. And, I've had different broadcasts where people might reach out to me where, I did that broadcast months ago, but they somehow found it in my feed and they watch it, or YouTube, for example, 80%, almost 80% of my views come from people who are not subscribed to my channel. Yeah. So the cool thing about it is you're not doing hashtags on YouTube, you're doing hashtags on LinkedIn, but you're doing keywords, and people search those keywords. So you have to make sure that not only do you create content, but you are using search terms and hashtags effectively and efficiently, that you're getting people to come in and comment, because the more activity that goes on, it really feeds into the algorithm, and then things get pushed and promoted. Give you a good example with Build Out. At the end of the year, I had 2 streams that I did where I had panels come in, and we talked about the year in review of 2021, and this was in December, and then we did 2022, a year, do a preview of 2022. And what was amazing was on the YouTube channel, and again, I stream on, Twitter, sometimes Facebook and LinkedIn and YouTube at the same time. What ended up happening was the algorithm, because of the way I tagged it properly, I had that episode, it didn't have a lot of views live on YouTube, but it's gotten over 600 or almost 700 views from just the search engine and the algorithm promoting it. So I'm just amazed, because it's not anything special. It's just us talking about what we think's coming up in 2022. But if you do it right, you really can make a big impact, and you can get a lot of engagement.
Yeah. Well, and what I've noticed too about it, because my videos are typically like this. They're not meant to be someone that wants to watch a 1-minute TikTok video and learn something quickly. I'm going to talk about a topic with a guest that's got experience. They've been in it a while. And what I really like to see is, I might not get 1,000 views on something, but if I get hours of views on a single video, then I'm like, okay, people sat and listened to that thing, watched it. That's what really makes me happy, because you know that it was something that people digested.
Yeah, and the thing with it too is, if I'm correct, and correct me if I'm wrong, I believe you have like a connections network of like 37,000 on LinkedIn.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah,
that is impressive. And so, the one thing about it, when I look at you, that's where I'd like to be, is in grow that connections network. And so I've focused hard on the quality of the connections that I make. And then the other thing, what I find is that the engagement is so much better if you are connecting to those on LinkedIn who are you're going to benefit from a relationship with them. They're going to benefit from a relation with you. So, and that really helps too with the views, and then also too with the use of your content and the interaction, let's say, from what you're talking about. So
it is, and that's what like you're doing with yours and the build out. My whole thing is I just don't want to see business owners struggling. I don't want to see them struggling, because people get into business and they think for some reason, because I got into business and I've been in it a while, and I'm one of those people that didn't fail in the first 5 years. And now I might have 10, 20 employees or even 100 employees, that I'm supposed to know what I'm doing. But honest to God, most of those people wake up in the morning and they go, I've got no idea what I should be doing today. And all we try to do is share information.
Let me share one other aspect of content as well. You can be a small company. You could be in a highly competitive industry.
Yep.
If you command and control the mind share, and that content is really what's driving out there, and your competitors aren't doing it, or they're doing it very, lackluster, you have a great opportunity. A lot of people say, hey, Jim, with all the graphics and all this, you must spend thousands of dollars out of your own pocket to be able to do what you're doing. And I say, I spend a couple $100.
Yeah.
And the thing is, what I do, anybody could do. I'm nothing special. But what's amazing is the impact, the engagement, and the opportunities, like I say, that I've created for my content. So if you're a small, medium company or a large company, if you dominate when it comes to content, you can control a lot of the market. You can control the messaging, and the others will be playing catch up with you. I mean, when we look at stuff that goes viral, you talk about TikTok. Give you a good example. There was a Sherwin-Williams store employee who would be rapping while he was mixing paint. He had 1 million followers on TikTok.
Oh, wow.
So, these alternative or some of these other types of platforms, they are effectively an extension of your marketing and your content, but they're great vehicles. So if you're doing YouTube or you're doing LinkedIn or you're doing TikTok, we're not the days of doing billboards, print
Yeah.
ads, commercials
Yeah.
on radio. That
Yeah.
still exists, right? But where it's really at is the digital sphere. That's where it's all at. And it's about capturing the mind share and the attention. And if you do that, man, you'll dominate.
Yeah, and you talk about TikTok, and I just got to mention Bonnie Strominger with Go Lids. I don't know if you've ever seen her on TikTok with the Go Lids. It's the
Yep.
thing, the clamshell, awesome recyclable thing that goes on top of a drink, and you can put a burger and fries and everything in it, and drink your drink while you're walking down the street. I know they have to have 10 plus million views on TikTok, and they've got some of them with multi-million views on using that product in action
Yeah.
and showing that product and helping to show people how it's used. And these platforms are really, like you said, if you own it, I mean, you could be a company that does specialty coatings for municipal water towers or something, and you could own it. You could own it probably if you were the ones that were showing, this is how we do it. This is why we do, why we do it. This is how our, just, and showing people before and after and working with clients or whatever it is. I mean, there's just so much you can do from a content perspective that you can do with your darn phone. You don't even have to do much.
No, you really don't. Like I say, you could do it sometimes in a few $100s and make a big impact. And the other thing too, that and a lot of people in my industry say, hey, you're an influencer, Jim. I've never viewed myself that way, but from creating content, it's going to happen where you're going to be an influencer. And I've got different friends, in the roofing industry, Bruno, no BS. You got people like that or big influencers in the roofing industry or some other industry, yourself and others that are in the manufacturing and industrial side. That's what you really want to be able to do is create yourself as an influencer so that people will listen to you and they will respect what you have to say. But you have to be honest, you have to be real, and you can't be the Kim Kardashians. You got to be authentic. Let's put it that way. And I think that's what people can relate to me. And I'll be at a conference and people walk up to me and they'll say, it's great to watch your content, to hear what you say. And I like how you listen to people, because the one thing I'm told a lot is when I interview people, although I'm overbearing you right now and talking a lot, but I do like to listen to people because their stories are amazing.
Yeah. No, and that's what I want. I want you to talk today, Jim, because this is why I interviewed like you. I've seen your interviews before on Build Out. I've watched how you do it. And I love letting people talk because they don't know they've got these stories and this knowledge inside of them. They just don't, because it's doing it every day.
Yeah.
Right? Like the guy that programs the super complex CNC machine that makes the craziest thing for the space shuttle, or not the space shuttle anymore, but for SpaceX that you just never even imagine, does it every day, goes home, doesn't even think about it. But if you got them on and they talked about it, it would be absolutely incredible.
Yeah. And I, like I said, I'd never monetized, and, the coatings and corrosion content I was doing, when I first started doing it, I said, I don't want you giving a pitch, like a sales pitch on your equipment or your product or service. And what ended up happening over time, I would have comments that would come in saying, you guys are talking about technology, you're talking about technique, you're talking about products and services, but you're not giving me a solution. Could you talk a little bit more about what that person you're interviewing, what they offer? So it was me trying to discover where's the fine line from making it kind of an advertisement to really providing some data. And so what I tend to focus on, let's talk about the generic, just keep it generic. Don't talk about your name brand or anything. Just talk about the technology, talk about the product, what it's made out of, what it does, what the benefit is. And a lot of people really found a great opportunity to learn from that, because, now it wasn't me interviewing somebody and they just specifically talked about their brand. They were talking about either a generic concept or they were talking about technology on a technology basis and keeping it simple that way. And people of all platforms, or all backgrounds could really understand what we were talking about. It wasn't over their head.
Yeah.
Because in my industry, we have acronyms, we have lingo for everything, and a lot of it doesn't make sense. And I worked internationally in Latin America, and where we might call something like for the air hoses going on abrasive blasting, and you're calling them a bull hose. In Latin America they don't know what that means. So the thing with it is you got to keep it as basic and as simple as you can, so that you don't leave people out.
Yes. Yes, that is. And I like how you explained how you go through the topics with people, because I like to do that too. I mean, I've got authors that come on once in a while and we mention their books, but when you talk about the subjects that are covered in their books, that's really what I think gives people the information and some knowledge, because they want to learn, be educated and learn. I think when you're listening to content, and really do it that way. I'm glad you explained that a little bit, because if someone's just gonna throw up a sales pitch, and you probably do. I get contacted by people now, and you go, well, what do you want to talk about? I want to talk about my program. Well, it's probably not going to work out for me, because we're not here just to talk about your online, whatever you want to sell, or this or that. It's not why I'm here.
Yeah, the only time I really will talk about a program, if it's, for example, dealing with a really important topic like mental health, or say something related to safety training and things like that. Not to say to push or promote a certain type of training, but to talk generally about the importance. For example, with fall protection in my industry, that there are a lot of critical things. In the industrial side, simple things like eye protection, or even back protection. Climbing falls and things like that. So.
That's the one thing I tell you. I'm just talking to a friend of mine that manages I would say reasonably large facility, and talking about safety and talking about how safety has gotten from, we used to kind of regulated 30, 40 years ago in industry that were, regulations is what really caused safety, or improved worker safety.
Yes.
But now it's gotten to the point that it really is the minds of the people working is what's taking these companies to the next level. When you look at construction or anything, or in manufacturing, it's not just that you have the personal protective equipment or you have the right whatever. It's that Damon remembers, don't walk that way, don't lift that way, don't go over there if this or that. And if I see somebody else doing it, make sure to help them and not let them do it. And it's so much more of a mental game to get that last bit of very important safety improvements done. Because I'm amazed. I've got a client that was in the oil field services industry, and the level of safety that they need to maintain is incredible.
Yeah.
And there's no way you can do it if you're just saying, yes, here's your personal protective equipment, you got to wear it, blah, blah, blah. They have to be thinking about it all the time. But it's a great point.
Yeah,
great point.
I know, I've been on multiple over the years, project work sites related to protective coatings. And what I really look for all the time and highly encourage is that toolbox talk, that safety talk before the crews go on. Talk about, hey, listen, we're working at height. Make sure of this. Check your harness, the buddy check system. All these important things you got to do, because one little mistake can really lead to a catastrophe. And a lot of times, like, for example, like if you're a sprayer and you inject yourself with a little bit of just a drop of that coating gets in your bloodstream, it could cause a fatality. It could cause all kind of problems. So, making sure that the workers are aware, hey, listen, I got to come down and I got to go to the hospital. Little things like that. I mean, you might think it's nothing. Oh, it's nothing, but it can be major catastrophe or death. So,
and it's this is a great example of simple content that you can create for your own company or your industry. Mm-hmm. And it would take you all of 10 minutes to do a quick little video to set up and do it and just say, hey, this is what you do if this happens.
Yeah. And when the pandemic rolled out, I was always on the road. I was a road warrior. I would meet with engineering firms and a lot of different, the EPCs that work in the oil and gas industry, or they could be firms working in oil and gas industry or directly with the owners. There was times where actually for some of the larger engineering firms, I would create content that they would put into their reference library, so that it might be a 15 minute topic talk about something. And then this way, when they were either training a new engineer on, how to write a protective coatings a specification, or a corrosion plan, or an inspection plan, maybe there was things that I would provide for them that they would put in a reference library. And the nice thing with that is it's a way to continually be engaged with those new staff members that are coming into that role, and especially when they're young professionals. And again, they want to learn, and in most cases, they've been thrown into that job function, and they don't have a base knowledge. They might have some basic understanding, but they're not expert yet. That'll come in time. And if I can help in that process with them, develop it and make them experts, that benefits me, but that benefits everybody, because if they are more effective in dealing with corrosion, we're going to save a lot of money, we'll save lives, and we could save our infrastructure no matter what it is.
Yeah. Yeah. And you hit one of the things one of the topics that I think people completely overlook content, and that's for internal training. It is so simple anymore. If you're in an office environment, you can simply put Zoom up and record your screen doing something to train new employees or train somebody on something. You can take your phone and or put a GoPro on your chest if you're doing something in an outside setting or someplace where you're moving around, and just talk about what you're doing. This content isn't just to put on social media. This is stuff that you can build a library of training, so that now when Damon comes to work for this company, he goes, hey, Susan, she did this training. She walked through her day from beginning to end on the job that you're going to be doing. Watch that first, and then we're going to help you start getting going, These things, and they don't have to be pretty, right? They don't have to be some production. It's just everybody's used to watching a video like this now that hasn't been produced with tens of thousands of dollars worth of videography equipment and editing and all that kind of stuff. If it shows them what they need to know, it works just fine.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of content shoot on an iPhone 11, and it's got, great camera. Yeah. And the other thing too, what I like too, if you're in the field, and let's say, for example, you're a company, a contractor works on pipeline maintenance and either the cathodic protection, or you're doing coatings, they go out there and shoot that video and put that into some type of a content series. This way, someone who's new or newer at it, or coming into that role from another role, they can have that immersion a little bit by watching the video. They're going to retain more. The other thing is, when they get out in the field, they're going to see exactly what they saw on the video, and it's going to resonate better with them, because they know now, oh, this is what I'm looking for. Okay, this, that, and the other thing. They just understand much better, and the retention of that knowledge, or that growth of that experience, is much more beneficial for them, because you don't want to have a dull, let's just talk about it. I think the video, when they see video, especially in the field, or interjected into conversation, and have that go back and forth, that's super important as well.
Yeah. Man, Jim, this has been awesome, because I think we covered a lot of different areas in content, and people just need to get to open up their mind a bit more, I think, about what content can do for them internally, externally, and how it really can help people. Because if you do it right, like you said, if you want to do it to get your brand out, you can dominate a market as a small company. And, internally, you can help your people be more effective, get trained faster, be safer. There's just so many different ways you can apply it. And it doesn't take a massive budget and crazy kind of, just start trying it.
Yeah, especially with video content. I kind of look at it, we went from the silent movies, and those made a big impact. We went into black and white and color movies. Then we had television. And then from television, we started doing things like Laserdisc and VHS. And if you remember the Beta, Max, remember Beta? Yeah. And then you got into, downloadable video. I remember a time where you had Netflix, where all you got from Netflix were DVDs and
Yep.
VHS tapes and things like that, right? You remember that?
Yes.
And where are
Yes.
they at today? They're not doing that. They've totally so there are examples of companies that really embrace content. And you and I have a mutual friend in Gabe Liao, and
Yes.
Gabe, has been a strong advocate of that. Content is king. It is not only king, it's also the queen as well. It's all the above. So, content is critical for a company of any size or a professional. But the nice thing about it is it could be live video, because this is live video here, but it's going to live in a replay as well. But getting that video content out there is super important no matter what industry you are. And in my industry, I need to see, and I want to see more content creators that are focused on corrosion and content. And it doesn't matter if it's a company's doing it or if it's the professionals doing it. I highly encourage it because it's very beneficial.
Yes, yes. Well, thanks so much for being here today. We had Jim Kunkle here talking about the importance of content and lots of different examples. So if you didn't listen to this whole thing, go back through, listen to it. I'm sure you're going to find some ideas for content. If you want to learn more about it, you can sure talk to Jim. He's under James Kunkle,
LinkedIn,
PCS on LinkedIn. So reach out to him there, connect with him, and he can give you some pointers there. Also, you can find me, Damon Pistulka, on LinkedIn, as you know. But thanks so much for being here today, Jim.
Thank you. I appreciate it. And I appreciate everybody watching live and also in the replay.
You bet. We'll be back again later this week. Have a great evening, everyone.